Hello. I know it's the end of a very long, insightful day. It's great that you're all still here. This is a session now, as Gaston already said, for banks. What it will be structured is as follows. I will give a short presentation of recent developments in the sustainable finance market that have led us to the evolution of the principles for responsible banking framework. What are the elements of responsible banking? I think you will all be able to relate to them. But then we will get into a discussion with some renowned sustainable finance colleagues who I will invite on stage after the presentation. I hope that's okay, otherwise you would be sitting here without a job for 10 minutes or so. And then that's also when I will introduce you properly. One thing I'd like to mention beforehand, do pay attention well. I will ask a question for each table in the room. Maybe if there is just one or two persons sitting on a table, you can move to another table then. Just to also steer a bit the discussion, because this is an opportunity for you to get engaged with your peers, to learn from each other, not only the peers, also if you don't represent a bank, banks as an important stakeholder, about elements we should be focusing on and stage in our discussion. So do pay attention. What are, for each of the things I will present today, we have questions and topics for discussion we can then deep dive into. As said, welcome to this panel. My name's Johanna Dichtl. I'm leading the implementation work for banks at UNEP. And it will be my pleasure to welcome those three renowned sustainable finance colleagues that I'm already introducing by name, so you know which banks you can expect later on stage. We will have Ofori-Koree on stage from Fidelity Bank in Ghana. We will have Mamoun from the Bank of Africa, and I'm looking at the room. Where do I see her? Sarah Klutse, there she is, from West African Development Bank. Is this one better? This is okay. Sorry about that. What I will present is, it's not my work that I'll present. This is the outcome of a process that we've been through for almost 2 years. As you know, UNEP, we work very collaboratively. This is a development process that is led by banks, for banks, with banks. And we have looked into what is the future of the principles for responsible banking as a framework. What does the roadmap to 2030 look like? We have explored the what now question, especially once a bank has set targets, what happens next? And this has been done in a process with more than 20 banks globally over a process of 2 years. On the one hand, Melissa, do we have the slides? No, okay, well, I'll just keep going. The principles, they are, on the one hand, a community. They are a global community of banks and key actors that bring together on a global level more than 350 banks. From this region, we have 40 banking members, both MENA as well as Sub-Saharan Africa, that together represent more than 90 countries, and we bring together more than 50% of global banking assets on a global scale. If you break that down to this region, to the African continent, that would translate to 11% of our membership and 8% of the assets. Just looking at that, you can see that there is a lot of power in that community element. We cover more than half the global banking assets. So if those assets are mobilized towards the goals that we are all working towards, international sustainability goals, you can see that the financial sector, the banking sector, has a massive power in actually reaching and contributing to those goals. The principles, we do not only bring together this community of banks, but it's also a strategic framework that helps integrate and act on relevant sustainability impacts, risks, opportunities across a bank's entire business. I'm hoping that at some point we will have those slides, because the visuals will actually help guide the conversation, but it doesn't matter, focusing on the community element. What are the community elements that we're all working together, and why is there this power in being part of a global banking community? On the one hand, banks can help strengthen global systemic resilience by supporting a significant share, as I mentioned, more than half of global banking assets, in addressing unprecedented systemic risks. Climate change, biodiversity loss, these are risks that we haven't seen before, that have not been embedded in historical financial modeling. Therefore, we cannot just forecast them looking into the past, but we know that they will materialize into big risks that pose a threat to the financial stability of economic as well as financial systems. Only in joint action of policymakers and the private sector worldwide can we address these. And what we do is at the PRB, we bring together that critical mass of banks that can mobilize assets and work towards addressing, at least contributing to addressing those systemic risks. The second component I'd like to highlight when we talk about the community of global responsible banks is that we can drive innovation through partnerships with leaders from science, business, as well as civil society. As a credible community, working to contribute to national and international sustainability goals. With us as the UN as a convener, PRB banks can effectively engage with regulators, with real economy players, as well as industry policy makers. In that regard, I'd like to highlight a newly established work track that's particularly relevant for our member banks in the room that we have set up. That's called the Clients and Customers Work Track, which will really work towards convening with real economy players. Banks have a role to play, but of course they also depend very much on the action of their clients when they want to reach their own sustainability goals. Third component that I'd like to highlight when we talk about the community of global banks is that we can drive industry progress by sharing learnings and by developing approaches together with peers and experts. So a PRB bank does, of course, benefit from peers' experience, as in this room, that we bring together, for example, in our communities of practice, but also in like regional roundtables like this one, global roundtable, as well as peer exchange formats. The fourth community, there we go, I think we have some slides now. Thanks for that, let me check whether, there we go. Okay. Can you go one slide back? Next slide. Yes, that's what I was talking about. These are like the four components of the global community of PRB banks. But now I'm also ready to move on. There you go. Thank you very much for bringing the slides up. We have evolved the PRB framework in the following sense, that on the one hand, it helps banks to understand and navigate risks, opportunities and impacts across four interconnected priority areas. Laura has already presented them. Those areas ultimately are deliberately framed very broadly. So individual action of a bank based on its individual impact analysis, of course, is the way to go, but usually any bank would identify at least one impact area that can be related to any of those four high-level priority areas. These are, like those four areas are, in short, it's climate, that includes mitigation and adaptation, nature and biodiversity, that includes topics like deforestation, water and pollution, health inclusive economies, as we just heard from Laura's session, and human rights, and they're all supported also by just transition as well as circular economy approaches as cross-cutting themes amongst those areas. The second here that you see on the right-hand slide, and there will be, we'll get into that much more deeply, is the responsible banking journey. There we go. I hope you can read it. Here, a couple of elements are important to highlight. The first one is the notion of progress. We want to have a framework that guides banks from any starting point at any level of maturity. So what we have done is define what are responsible banking practices, what are foundational steps, but we have also defined the way forward. So what does leading practice look like? Where could a bank, that is considered as aspirational, ambitious be by 2030? And we have defined the leading end of practices for all the elements of responsible banking, but also for the 4 thematic areas that you see inside. This is to be seen as something, inspirational that any bank could, take some guidance from. The second element here I'd like to emphasize is that we have defined 3 cornerstones of responsible banking: assessment, strategy, as well as action. For those that are familiar with the principles and the way we were communicating up to now is we had key steps of implementation starting with impact analysis. You will see that here. It's part of the assessment cornerstone, and that still continues to be an important element, but we now have a much broader framing. The notion is that we want to enable banks to focus where it matters most. Focus where it matters most, that a bank needs to, of course, assess where they are, analyze impact, risks, and opportunities, and then take action on most significant impact areas by setting targets and then delivering on those targets. Now, at the same time, if you do not set a target, a responsible bank would still take action on other areas that are relevant as well, while to stay on top of relevant risks and opportunities across those 4 sustainability areas. You can read that somewhat clockwise, but it's, of course, it can be used very flexibly. So it's not like you first do this and then go through the wheel. So you would find elements in there that speak to assessment, and especially monitoring and transparency is something that will happen continuously. Therefore, you kind of see it at the end of the wheel. But what is the most important element here is that once strategy, governance, targets, and all of this have been defined, the actual work begins, which is defined as action and transition plans and the different categories of action that banks would undertake. Just in the notion of action and transition plans, we see them as synonymous. Transition plans tend to be associated with climate mitigation, whereas an action plan can be more broad, for example, for working towards gender equality, financial health and inclusion, and so on, but ultimately they mean the same. So with that, I would conclude that presentation just on a note about, because it was also called the Evolved PRB Framework, just to emphasize what has changed and also what hasn't changed. What hasn't changed are the 6 principles. They have been identified as fit for purpose and effective. What also hasn't changed is the bank's commitment. The focus really is on delivering on the commitment. That's what we heard very strongly. So little appetite for additional, but really focus on the work that needs to be done. Things that have changed that I already presented is a much stronger focus on target delivery, on action, on we have also identified those 4 priority areas. And for those of you that are banks, one important outcome was also a very simplified and hopefully very simplified and much easier approach to reporting, because the PRB never were intended to be a reporting framework, but they really are a strategic framework. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation, but I would also like to ask to the room, and then while we get into the discussion on a table basis, I will invite the panelists on stage. So what of those things that I just showed you, what should we be focusing on? Like, you see all the different elements. Here we can talk about strategy, governance, targets, we can talk about individual thematic areas. We can talk about clients, where is your interest, where would you really like to know more from your peers, respectively banks as stakeholders. So if you can just discuss that in tables, I will go through the room and gather a couple of, ideas, and then we will actually get into the discussion on stage. Thanks. Okay. Any volunteers? Anything you came up with at your table? What are your areas of interest? Where would you like to hear more from your peers? Did I hear I can? Something?
Okay, thank you. Our thinking at this table with my peer partners, we would start with a healthy economy, because with a healthy economy we can support the development of the ecological transition that will come from the decarbonization and the biodiversity protection or regeneration. And I think if we go through a healthy economy, and we think if we go through a healthy economy and the environmental transition that are required, human rights will be a logical output. I would even say outcome. One thing we highlight is that to start with a healthy economy and as a master brick, we believe that government commitment, public sector commitment, should be proactive and visible, and not only consultative and enabled. Thank you.
Thank you, very good. We'll ask how much everybody feels comfortable with talking about this. Other topics we should be discussing with peers on stage. Did you come up with anything?
We also have I think in the room we have banks that are not yet members, so maybe what is the add value of joining here?
Good, you can do that. Anything on this table?
Yeah, the conversation at this table was a lot about getting to know each other first, which was great. But more for interest of the panel, the question was around the PRB as one-size-fits-all kind of framework for banks across the globe, and whether some local initiative tailoring of the standards should be assessed. And we were talking about the parallel with the PSI and the Nairobi initiative for the insurance industry.
Thank you, well understood. Okay, unless there are... Did you have anything very good?
Thank you. Here we based our discussions on our journey as the PRB Bank. We are Bank of Africa. And when we looked at our journey, we found out that we've already done everything related to governance, strategy, and our main challenge was with the target, how to reach our target regarding our clients. So so if today we were to really be interested in hearing something, to be how to reach our target regarding our clients.
Thank you so much, very good points. So I'm going back on stage. On the point about clients, let me also maybe make a little bit of advertisement for tomorrow. There will be a dedicated client engagement session tomorrow as well. Okay, having heard the wishes from the room, anybody would like to respond immediately?
I can start.
Please get started.
Okay, well done for staying till the end. We hope this is interactive and very useful to you. So, my name is Nanaya. I'm Head of Partnerships, Sustainability and CSR at Fidelity Bank in Ghana. And we started our UNEP sustainability journey in Q4 of 2022. So we're fairly new, and hopefully those who are not members, we can share some insights. Now, Fidelity Bank is the largest privately owned bank in Ghana, not to be confused with Fidelity Bank in Nigeria. And for us, we had been working with donors in the past. We had been working heavily in the financial inclusion space, but we weren't intentional about sustainability. So in Q4 of 2022, when we started, thankfully, we had already joined UNEP, so we could rely on the framework to start guiding us, right? So we started from the basics in terms of assessment. We conducted our double materiality assessment, and then we used that with other tools to help us to set our targets. And that helped us with our governance structure. It helped us with developing our sustainability strategy as a whole, and then also in establishing the department, because remember, this was being done as a new department as a whole. So what was key for us, and the support from UNEP and PRB, you know, at that time, the PRB Academy, I think, had just started. So we got our executive committee, our management committee, to at least take the first course on responsible banking, so that the language, they understood the language and nothing was too new. We also got mandatory sustainability courses for all staff, our relationship managers, our relationship officers, and then we ensured that everything we did started and ended with evidence. So we established a research and impact management desk, which helped with the assessments and also helped with the reporting and then the impact management. So that's just a quick starter on how we used PRB in our space.
Thank you so much. So the first question that Nadia already responded to was a bit about the added value of being a PRB signatory. Maybe you want to add to that and also give those banks that might consider joining or are new in their journey, give a bit of an overview of how you actually got started on your journey. Does that sound okay?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for staying so late. Alors, Mamoun Tahri from Bank of Africa has said, the journey from our perspective was really special, because at the very beginning we signed for Principles for Responsible Banking to show or to position ourselves as a green bank or as a responsible bank in Morocco and in Africa. And then we really dig into the principles of responsible banking and see what or how we can comply with these principles. So for us, the most structured approach that we did was the report, because the report is really about, we really wanted to be not the best in class, but at least among the best in class, and to make sure that what we're reporting was really complying with the principles, and that we will get some value from it. And when we made the huge step was when we set the target at the 3rd year, and we have another year to be sure that we could reach the target. And with the targets, we're able really to define our priorities in terms as a bank and as a group, of course. So the first target was, of course, to reach to implement our climate strategy. And the second target was the financial inclusion. And the second target for us was not easy to find, because we wanted to be sure that it was a target that was, as they say, when you set a target, it needs to be smart, but more than smart, it needs really to be comptable, that we could reach it. Yes, so that we could measure it, well, measurable, and we could be able to reach it. So we really, and then we had the meeting with one of our, as a group, with one of our subsidiary in the group, and we saw that it was the best tool to reach this financial inclusion target. So this is where it helped us to also to bring some other companies of the group with us, and to include them in this more global approach. Voilà. But I think that we will talk about the challenges afterwards. But now we have so many questions, and we'd really like to see how we can keep on going on our journey. And to answer one direct question that was said regarding the economy, that a bank should support the healthy economy. It's not always easy as a bank to imagine itself as a supporter of a healthy economy, and it's not always easy to imagine a bank other than just giving loans. So how do we make sure that the loans that you give match a healthy economy? And for us, that was really a very tricky question, because as long as you have customers coming, you give them money, and then you get profitability from the money by avoiding also NPLs. So it's quite a simple equation, but since you try to include in this equation all the responsible part, it gets more tricky, and maybe more, you insert more complexity in your equation. And once again, one of the not the best approach, one of the approach that we found was included into UNEP 5, which was the positive impact tool, where we linked the SDGs, the Moroccan SDGs, so what they call the country needs, we linked them to our investments in our portfolio. That was the first step, and then the second step was to develop our sustainable finance framework. So you have the issue to answer directly. What we did is, by the positive impact tool, is to make sure that first we define the country needs in terms of SDGs, and what kinds of banking investments were complying with these SDGs. But the tricky part, once again, in the positive impact tool, is that once an SDG is reached, you do not need to invest in it anymore. So every more penny given in this SDG, if reached, do not count anymore as a positive impact investment. So this is why it was very difficult to shape our investment, because the commercial was saying, this is a very profitable sector, I earn money in it, I should keep on investing in it. You said, okay, but the SDG has been reached, and people are answering you, you told me last year that we need to invest in it, it was not reached already. So this is some very discussions that should be that are quite hard to deal with, and this is why today we have been developing our sustainable finance framework. For example, 31%, according to the positive impact tool, are sustainable, whereas according to our framework, 44% of our investments are sustainable. So the difference is quite impactful. It's 1/3 more in one way than another. So just to conclude, because I don't want to monopolize all the talking, just to conclude regarding this first question, is we need to have support, we need to have indicators, we need to have the experience and the expertise of UNEP, but we also need to apply it to our local reality, and also to apply it to the business needs, and this is very important.
We also have Youssef on stage, who will be our translator, just in case you're wondering who the gentleman is. So Youssef, if you could translate for Sarah, please.
Alors, Madame Sarah, juste, il y avait des questions un peu sur les expériences ou les besoins des banques en termes d'atteindre une économie résiliente, de soutien à l'écologie, à la transition écologique. Aussi des questions sur quelles sont les initiatives locales à mettre en place, et aussi à adresser lorsque vous êtes en cours de développement de votre parcours du PRI, et aussi une question par rapport à l'atteinte ou la fixation des objectifs et l'atteinte des résultats dans le cadre du PRI. Voilà.
Merci pour la question. Donc, je représente la BOAD, qui est la Banque Ouest-Africaine de Développement. Donc, notre mission, c'est d'assurer le développement des pays de la sous-région. Donc, nous couvrons 8 pays. Nous avons le Togo, le Bénin, la Côte d'Ivoire, le Sénégal, le Mali, le Niger, le Burkina Faso et la Guinée-Bissau. Donc nous ne travaillons pas que dans un seul pays, mais nous travaillons avec ces 8 pays, ces 8 États, que ce soit au niveau du secteur privé comme au niveau du secteur public. Alors nous avons intégré les PRB en septembre 2023 et cette année nous avons publié notre premier rapport qui justement intègre tout ce que nous avons fait dans la sous-région en matière de durabilité. Donc nous ne sommes pas sans savoir que pour l'alignement aux CDD, nous avons besoin d'un cadre. Et cette communauté nous permet d'avoir un cadre de référence, d'avoir également un langage commun pour toutes les initiatives en matière de développement durable pour assurer ainsi un investissement durable et responsable. Et en matière de...
Just to translate this first part, so Sarah is actually introducing BOAD with the West African Development Bank, which is a sub-regional development bank covering 8 African countries, including Togo, Benin, Mali, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea-Bissau, and Burkina Faso. And of course, on public sector and private sector projects, BOAD joined the UNEP PRB in September 2023 with the first PRB report in that year. Also that the PRB is actually a framework allowing BOAD Bank to have a common language when it comes to sustainable finance in general, and also to ensure alignment with the key sustainable development related objectives.
Okay. Par rapport aux projets que nous finançons au niveau de la BOAD, 100% de nos projets passent par un screening. Donc nous faisons une évaluation environnementale et une évaluation en matière de RSE qui prend en compte les 4 domaines des PRB. Donc chaque projet que nous finançons, nous allons sur le terrain, nous allons rencontrer les parties prenantes pour voir qu'est-ce qui peut avoir un impact réel pour les communautés. Donc c'est comme ça que nous évoluons sur absolument tous nos projets dans les 8 pays de la zone UNEP.
So in terms of projects financed by BOAD in the 8 countries, it comes to, of course, sustainable development projects. There's, of course, a screening conducted by BOAD following the 4 domains of PRB, and this is actually done for each project that is financed by the bank.
Thank you so much. So what I had, basically you already responded to at least parts of the questions that were asked from the room, which is great, but I think we can deep dive a bit more. What I did hear is, of course, there is a lot of screening, reporting that would be the starting point of everything. Maybe let us get into a bit like the strategic components of action. I think that is quite important. Of course, in the beginning, one needs to have a thorough strategy, one needs to have targets as well as governance in place. But what happens then afterwards? We deep dived into some action categories you mentioned, particularly the work with clients. But what I'd like to bring up is language. When I say language, I don't mean French, English, which might be an issue, of course, as well. But I mean different functions in a bank. When we were talking over lunch, Nani, I'm looking at you. We already brought that to the table, and that is very closely linked to the topic of client engagement as well. You would have sustainability functions on stage. We tend to have sustainability specialists in the room as well. But what is very important is to talk to business, to talk to risk internally, and then ultimately going out, have a conversation with clients as well, who might also speak another kind of language. So my question to you is, can you share some of your experiences, how you go about this as a challenge?
All right, thank you. So just again to set the context so that it flows through the conversation. So in Fidelity Bank Ghana Limited, we've structured sustainability so that it creates value and also it protects the value that we are creating. And what it means is that we have 3 units within sustainability. Sustainable finance, where we're dealing with all the blended financing conversations, guarantees, supporting local economic stimulus, etc. sustainable operations, and we're looking at the greenhouse gas emissions, everything to do with gender, workplace, all of that. And then we also cover all of our charitable activities. But sitting in all of these three areas are working groups which are cross-functional. So these cross-functional working groups have the capacity building. They are trained to understand sustainability from our perspective. And then they also share their perspective from the different parts of the business. Because we cannot sit in one part of the business and not integrate sustainability into our work. If we do that, we don't achieve anything. So that's where the language starts from. So the conversations we have within these working groups use language which is resonating with all the people in those particular working groups. So when they go and engage with their stakeholders, they can spread that sustainability conversation on our behalf comfortably. The other thing that we do is a lot of capacity building and training. So UNEP has a wonderful course on ESRA, so environmental and social risk analysis. I think if you've not looked at it, please look at it, especially for your relationship managers and relationship officers. Now, when they understand sustainability from that perspective, when they engage with the clients and customers, then they become the ambassadors of sustainability in that respect. Also from our board level and from our executive committee level, we have a number of training sessions with them so they understand where we're coming from regarding sustainability. And just another part which is important for us. So our central bank, Bank of Ghana, put out Sustainable Banking Principles in 2019. 7 principles that all banks are supposed to adhere to. But what happened? COVID happened. So nobody really focused on it for some time. But then when the bank decided to be intentional around our sustainability journey, we had to adhere to our Bank of Ghana principles. We were already signatories to UNEP. We went on the relevant courses and we set up the relevant governance working groups and governance structures to help us to roll out this. So that's the approach that we are taking. And also just to finalize on that, we run a number of train-the-trainer sessions for our different stakeholders in the bank. If you have a sustainability department, we usually see ourselves like an octopus, right? So you're sitting in the middle and you're engaging with different stakeholders. So these train-the-trainer sessions enable the other departments to have the confidence to talk about sustainability when they are engaging with their clients and with their stakeholders. So that's a way that we have tried to roll this out.
Thank you so much. Mamoun, would you like to share some experiences regarding working with clients?
Working with clients is quite not easy. When it comes to sustainability, it all depends first if it's internal or external clients. As just said, it's very interesting regarding the experience in Ghana. The fact that you need first to be able to convince your colleagues at the very beginning and to make sure that they can understand what you say and to progressively put more and more sustainability in their actions and in their speech. But for me, the success of a sustainability unit is the fact is its disappearance. If the unit disappears, it means that you did the job and that the sustainability is everywhere in the company. It's like ecology in politics. The day that we would not have a green political party, which it will mean that it's everywhere in the political spectrum. So this is the very same thing. And then when it comes to external clients, clients are not very complicated, since the main thing if you want to reach clients is by reducing the interest rate. It's always the same story, it's always the same. You need to provide some incentives, whether it represents money, so direct money, so cashbacks, or you can incentive them by reducing the interest rate. But once again, we were talking with the EBRD earlier on during the lunch, And once again, what's the green loan? Is this a loan that is just dedicated to green purposes, or is it a loan with a reduced interest rate because of the proceeds, or is it a loan which is linked to cashback or to technical assistance, etc.? So we really need. We're expecting also PRB to, or global financial institutions to clear this very precise question. From our perspective now, a green loan is uniquely a loan that is dedicated to a green purposes. This is very simple. It doesn't mean necessarily technical assistance. It doesn't mean special interest rates, but it's just dedicated to green purposes. And this is why we built our sustainability finance framework, because we know now what kind of engagements are sustainable and which are not sustainable. So this is for us, for clients, the question. Now the other, and if we want to share our experience that we're sharing everywhere. Now it's a more specific experience in Morocco. It was done starting in 2016, but we started negotiating with the EBRD, I think we did it 2011, 2012. And we were talking, we always remember, we had 3 to 4 people. The previous person in sustainability, we were the EBRD, and we had 3 or 4 persons talking. And the question was very simple, we would like to develop the same product that we developed in Turkey, in Morocco, with EBRD, with some cashback, technical assistance, and a loan. Technical assistance plus a loan. I said, what's the incentive in terms of interest rate? No incentive. The customer will always learn where his or her interest is. I said, if you don't have cashback or anything like that, you won't be selling anything. He told me no. He came back 2 years later with saying, okay, now we're offering financial incentive, and then 2 years later, it was a huge success in Morocco. We managed to sell more than $100 million in 8 years in terms of this kind of financial products. So, in markets where they're very sensitive to price, you reduce the interest rate you can sell to customers, and they can buy anything. So now the purpose to reduce is green investments, but you can sell whatever you want with that way. And it works regarding energy efficiency, because electricity is expensive in Morocco. So just to give you one quick example, when it comes to customers, the return on investment were achieved after 4 or 5 years, whereas the general maturity of credits or loans were from 5 to 7 years. So before reimbursing everything, the profitability on the investment was achieved. But when we tried to do the same thing, exactly the same arrangement with water and recycling, it failed, because water is not expensive in Morocco, and no one is interested by recycling. So that shows you that you always need to find what's the interest of the customer, and once again, to find a way to reach him.
Merci pour la question. Là, c'est un sujet qui est assez sensible au niveau de nos États, parce que déjà, nous cherchons à nous développer, et la question de la durabilité freine un peu. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, qu'est-ce que nous faisons? Comme je l'ai dit précédemment, nos clients, c'est les États, les banques commerciales et le secteur privé. Donc nous essayons de faire des ateliers régionaux où nous sensibilisons les parties prenantes étatiques, communautés locales et autres à la thématique biodiversité, climat ou développement durable, pour que justement elles puissent comprendre nos attentes lorsqu'elles viendront pour les financements. De même, pour le secteur privé, nous faisons également des formations soit à notre siège, où nous allons dans les pays, où nous regroupons soit les parties prenantes du secteur agricole ou les parties prenantes du secteur de l'énergie, et nous faisons des formations, des ateliers. Maintenant, pour toucher le plus grand nombre de personnes, nous avons des podcasts sur notre site que nous faisons, que nous présentons la durabilité, toutes les différentes thématiques qui ont trait au développement durable, nous les traitons au travers de podcasts sur notre site pour que le plus grand nombre de personnes puissent comprendre de quoi il s'agit et venir vers nous pour demander des financements. Et pour aller plus loin, qu'est-ce que nous avons fait cette année? Nous avons levé plus de 500 millions de dollars de green bond pour aider justement les projets verts et les projets sociaux. Donc ça va attirer les PME à venir vers la banque ouest africaine pour se financer et faire évoluer leurs projets dans la perspective de la durabilité. Donc nous mettons fort accent sur la formation. Parce que sans la connaissance, on ne peut pas aller de l'avant. Il faut que nos parties prenantes soient intéressées, qu'ils comprennent la valeur ajoutée d'adopter une démarche de durabilité avant de rentrer dans le monde. Sinon, excusez-moi, ils ont faim, ils cherchent à se développer, ils sont réfractaires à tout ce qui est critères de durabilité. Donc notre travail est plus dans la sensibilisation, à leur faire comprendre la valeur ajoutée de cette démarche pour les emmener, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, à venir vers tout ce qui est durabilité, tout ce qui est vert, tout ce qui est impact. Voilà un peu.
So just to translate what Sarah was mentioning about BOAD's work with clients and their engagement with stakeholders. It is yet, of course, an important subject to the bank. However, sustainability is something very limiting sometimes, and very difficult to implement, especially vis-à-vis the type of clients that they are managing. And these are states, governments, commercial banks, but also local actors. So since the audience of the bank is quite broad, they're actually using awareness as a tool to disseminate the knowledge that they need to promote when it comes to how to promote sustainable finance vis-a-vis these different types of clients that are different in terms of size, and also they use awareness also to manage expectations coming from the key from the clients, and this awareness can be made on through different sectors, that energy, as well as on agriculture. And they use some of the tools like podcasts. They use actually podcasts available on the bank's website, so that they are actually able to disseminate to the maximum extent possible this awareness effort they are leading. They actually also initiated or raised around or over $500 million in green bonds in order to attract several types of clients, mainly SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and also hence the need, of course, to advance the sustainability topics through trainings, podcasts, and knowledge sharing.
I just wanted to add to what my colleagues have said as well. So, you know, the banks, you all deal with different customers. You have retail customers, you have corporate customers, and they have different needs. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, ever. So in our space, for example, when Mamoun spoke about energy mix and energy costs, etc. So we've seen that the energy costs are expensive in Ghana. So we're offering renewable energy at 10% interest rates, when the general interest rate is around 30% in Ghana. We've lowered it so that it's attractive to them and it's incentivizing them to change their behavior. But we will not do the same necessarily for all of our corporate clients, right? Because we're looking at the schools and we're looking at education sector and the core benefits that we get. Now, if we talk about local economic stimulus, how do we get people to join our sustainability journey, particularly for youth and female-led businesses? There again, we're offering cheaper interest rates. So it does come down to what's in it for them. And most of the time, it's around the preferential interest rates. So we're offering interest rates at 5%, at 10%, when ordinarily it's in the 30s. So you always need to look at that sweet spot for your customers and your clients, and you use that to meet your your sustainability needs. So that's just what I want to add.
Thank you so much. So we heard, of course, a lot about price incentive pricing, business ultimately, but what I heard as well is, I started the question with language, but I heard very much, understanding, raising awareness, getting engaged and talking to clients. So that's quite interesting. I would like to ask one last question to each and every one of you about, one challenge that you are facing that could also be relevant in your regional context, particularly, but also thinking about, how could that challenge be overcome when you, for example, think about, being part of a community? What could the PRB as a community do to help that solve that challenge? Or what could another potential solution be to also think, challenge, but also how could we overcome that? Of course, we might not have a full answer to that, I know, but let's at least get into that. Who would like to get started? They're translating.
Yes. Okay. So easily for us is data. It's data availability, data quality. And because we're fairly new on our journey, what we found is that sometimes the data doesn't exist. We're looking at all of the metrics around sustainability, emissions, resource efficiency, looking at SMEs we're supporting, disaggregated data when it comes to gender issues. Sometimes it doesn't exist, right? And then you need to engage the different parts of your internal stakeholders so that they know and understand why all of this should be in your core banking system. If your core banking system is not collecting this data, you will not have it to be able to enable you to do your analysis anyway. So for us, that's the key challenge that we have. Maybe it's something that UNEP can support us with in terms of technical assistance and support, or just information about how we can navigate that space. Because the data is what we're going to use to do our analysis and improve on the work that we're doing going forward. The other panel was talking about behavioral analysis, etc. And it all sits on data and the quality of data that we have. So that's that from my end.
Thanks for a very clear challenge. Mamoun, passing on to you.
Yes, thank you. My challenge will be more specific. It will be regarding, I don't know if the word is in English, but the decoupling inside the same industry. For example, as in Morocco, we are the most invested bank in terms of sustainability. When it comes to climate risks, when it comes to products, etc., we are the most invested bank. Now, the thing is that when you are 2 years in advance, for example, you need to sell products to still be profitable. But when you ask more and more questions, or let's say just a client comes to you and he needs to fill a paper to ask for a loan, so you need to produce a series of sheets, etc. And you just give him one more sheet than the other bank. And this sheet is dedicated to climate risks, dedicated to social risks, etc. And we see his or her eyebrows will rise, and he will say, why? Why do you ask me this or this or this? Do you have something with me? And it will be easy for him to change and go to another bank, especially if it's a good and reliable customer. So this is one very interesting question. And these questions today, this issue is raised regarding PRB, for example. We reached the point where today the question is, what's next? So what do we do next? Do we still keep on going, or do we stop for the moment and try to convince and train our customer? Just as said, for the West African Development Bank, we today, for example, in Morocco, sustainability comes, I think, at the 8th or 9th rank when a customer has to choose a bank. The first, for SMEs, the first criteria to choose a bank is the delays. Price only comes second. So delays 1 first, efficiency 2, 3 price, and sustainability is 8th or 9th. And we created a share of sustainability and impact finance just to make sure that sustainability gets from the 8th rank to the 5th or the 4th rank, to make sure that people also, when they choose a bank, when they apply for a loan, if they have this famous extra sheet, they will know why they have this extra sheet. But for us, this is the main challenge as of today, is to keep on track, because we need to stay on the track. We know that it's the not only the richest, but it's the right track. We need to stay on this right track, but we also need to make sure that customers understand why we chose this track, and exactly as you said, why this track is good for us. It's exactly the same question. So as of today, they say in French to hit to hit 2 birds with 1 stone. Now we're trying to hit 10 birds with 1 stone, and I hope that it will be possible and feasible.
Au niveau de la BOAD, nous avons plusieurs défis. Déjà, j'ai parlé de la connaissance de la thématique. Déjà, donc ça, on fait des sensibilisations et des formations. Nous avons également un défi qui est très important, qui est le développement des projets climat ou de développement durable. Parce qu'il faut que ces projets soient éligibles aux critères. Donc pour ce faire, qu'est-ce que nous avons fait au niveau de la BOAD? Nous avons créé un domaine qui aide les entreprises à monter des projets climat et les aide à trouver des ressources dédiées. Maintenant, après cela, pour ne pas les abandonner, on a un autre domaine qui est là, qui s'occupe du suivi et de la mise en œuvre de ces projets que nous avons financés avec des fonds dédiés. Ça, c'est un premier défi du montage des projets climat. Un autre défi que nous avons, c'est la réglementation. Au niveau de notre zone, nous avons peu de réglementation en matière de développement durable. Donc, c'est vrai, nous allons nous refinancer auprès des bailleurs internationaux, mais au niveau de notre zone, il n'y a pas de réglementation. Et c'est difficile pour les entreprises de suivre la réglementation européenne. Déjà, cette réglementation européenne, elle change régulièrement, donc c'est difficile de suivre le train. Donc, l'idéal aujourd'hui, c'est de se concerter en bailleurs africains pour essayer de trouver une sorte de taxonomie africaine que nous pouvons suivre pour fédérer toutes nos parties prenantes dans cette thématique de la durabilité et également, comme l'a dit ma collègue tout à l'heure, les données, la fiabilité des données. Pour avoir des données fiables, il faut déjà avoir des experts en la matière. Déjà, si on n'a pas des experts pour générer ces données, on ne pourra pas avoir des données fiables. Au niveau du secteur public, bon, ils sont à la traîne sur cette thématique. Donc les données qu'ils vont fournir, ils ne sont pas forcément fiables. Donc il faut de l'expertise dans tous les domaines pour pouvoir générer des données assez fiables pour que les régulateurs, les autres bailleurs ainsi que les parties prenantes aient une information commune, une information standardisée qui pourrait effectivement permettre la comparativité institution par institution ou État par État des données ou bien des reportings qui ont été faits. Donc voilà, entre autres, les grandes difficultés que nous avons. Merci.
So, of course, similar to other banks, BOAD is actually facing several challenges, starting by, of course, the knowledge of what about the thematic of sustainability in general. Also, the challenge related to project development when it comes to green projects, for them to be compliant and eligible to global climate financing. Also, this actually entails the need to build the capacity of clients to originate their projects, but also, so they have a domain that works on on supporting sort of facility to support the origination of projects by clients, but also there's another domain where the work is on the monitoring of these projects, so that they are, of course, continuously compliant with their, say, internal rules, but also, of course, be compliant with international donors. There's also challenge related to regulation, which is not yet mature in the West Africa Monetary Union region. which makes it difficult both for the bank but mainly for the clients to look for, I would say, external regulations to be compliant with. That's mainly the European regulation. So this lack of a local maturity when it comes to regulation is also a challenge. Hence, the proposal, the need for an African taxonomy. I think the third and final challenge was data, which is I think shared by Fidelity Bank Ghana. It's on the data reliability and also finding the expertise needed by them as a bank, but also by the clients, so that the projects are compliant with the regulations, but also with the requirements of the donors, and this will, having reliable data will allow a common and standard norms when it comes to reporting and compliance with climate-related regulations.
Thank you so much. Looking at the time, we're at the very end. We heard a lot about challenges. I think shared challenges, common challenges, maybe individual one, depending on each context as well. But let us also pick up that notion of progress. We need to progress together, and we also need to work together to be able to overcome these challenges. At some point, for example, advocating for an enabling policy environment, how to overcome data challenges, how to have those conversations with clients to raise the level of awareness that's needed. So there are multiple aspects, but together we can move forward. With that, let me say a big thank you to you, Nanaye, Mamoun, Sarah, for being here until the very end of the day. Thank you to the audience for staying until the end of day one. Tomorrow we will continue with the second day, but I'm not preempting, Gaston is already here, so thanks very much.